Hey everybody, it's Christine here. Today we're going to be working on adding our ingredients to our edit form. We'll adjust the table to make it easier to find the ingredients we need, and then we'll adjust our code to filter out the ingredients for the specific recipe selected in Recipe View. And finally, we'll adjust the edit form to display those ingredients. Without further ado, let's get into it. Let's go to our ingredients table and modify it to make finding our ingredients easier. We're going to create two new columns. First, add the column for recipe ID. Then add a column for ID. In the recipe ID column, select the first entry cell and add this formula. Equals, filter, open parentheses, recipes, open square brace, ID, closing square brace, comma, recipes, open square brace, name, closing square brace, equals D2. When the autofill pops up, click the check mark. Again, if you missed the autofill pop-up, you can also highlight the cell and move the blue circle down to fill the rest of the rows. In the ID column, select the first entry cell and type equal, row, open and closing parentheses. Again, when that pop-up appears, click the check mark or drag the blue circle all the way down to fill the rest. Now we're going to create a function in our code.js file to find all of the ingredients for a specific recipe. In your code.js file, type out const get ingredient data equals open and closing parentheses, arrow, curly braces. In our curly braces, the first thing we'll do is grab the recipe ID from our recipe view sheets. So type out const recipe view sheet equals spreadsheet app dot get active open and closing parentheses dot get sheet by name open parentheses and then in quotes recipe view closing parentheses. And then on the next line, let's type out const recipe ID equals recipe view sheet dot get range open parentheses and in quotes G3 closing parentheses dot get value open and closing parentheses. The next thing we need to do is grab our ingredients sheets. So let's type out const ingredients sheet equals spreadsheet app dot get active open and closing parentheses dot get sheet by name open parentheses and then in quotes ingredients closing parentheses. Then we need to get the values of all the data in the table. Const data equals ingredients sheet dot get data range open and closing parentheses dot get values open and closing parentheses. We're going to get the headers into their own array to use later with const headers equals data square bracket 0 closing square bracket. Then we put the rows into their own separate thing with no headers using const rows equals data dot slice open parentheses 1 closing parentheses. Next, we need to find the column where their recipe ID is. Const recipe ID index equals headers dot index of open parentheses and then in quotes recipe ID closing parentheses. Next, we just filter out the rows where the recipe IDs match the recipe ID we found on our recipe view. Const matching rows equals rows dot filter, open parentheses, row, arrow, row, square brace, recipe ID index, closing square brace, triple equal sign, recipe ID. Finally, we just need to return what we found. Return matching rows. All right, let's test to see if it's working. Above the return line, add console.log, parenthesis, matching rows, closing parenthesis. Then just outside of the function, write get ingredient data, open and closing parentheses. Let's click that run button and see what we get. We should see a parent array filled with arrays of every row that matches our recipe. Now we just need to modify the open edit recipe function to give the ingredient data to our edit form templates. At the top, add const ingredient data equals get ingredient data, open and closing parentheses. Now find the line template.recipe data equals recipe data. Below it, let's type out template.ingredient data equals ingredient data. Let's move back into our edit form HTML document. First, let's find the end of the load event listener where we're creating all of our dropdown elements. We're going to do something very similar to create our ingredient lines, but instead of making options, we will be making the inputs for each. At the bottom of our load event listener, just after get protein, let's make our ingredient data available to be used. So let's type out const ingredient data equals JSON dot parse, open parentheses, in quotes, angle brace, question mark, equal sign, JSON dot stringify, open parentheses, ingredient data, closing parentheses, question mark, closing angle brace. This looks a little crazy, but JSON is just a type of data format that's going to be easier for us to use here. Next, let's loop over every row of the ingredients data so we can create the inputs. So type out ingredient data dot for each, open parentheses, row, arrow, curly braces, and closing parenthesis. Inside of the curly braces, let's give our data from the row object names to refer to. Let's type out const square bracket amount, comma, measurement, comma, ing name, comma, recipe name, comma, recipe ID, comma, ingredient ID, closing square brace equals row. Next, let's create the box that will hold all of our row data. For this part, we can make our lives easier by scrolling down and finding where we're making our inputs for ingredients on the Add Ingredient button, and then we can copy it and paste it. And we'll go in and make changes that we need for this to work. In the quant inputs, we're going to keep everything mostly the same, but we are going to add a new attribute just above where we're appending the child. We're going to add quant input dot value equals amount. Then we can scroll down to the measure inputs. For this one, we're going to do the same thing. Measure input dot value equals measurements. We can scroll down to the name input and add the line name input dot value equals ing name. Now we're going to copy one of these blocks of inputs and paste it to make a new one to hold our ID. We're going to remove the placeholder line and the style line. We're going to update the variable name across all lines to ID inputs. We're going to change the name to ing ID. We're going to change the value to ing ID. And then we're going to add one more line just before the append child line. And in that new line, we're going to add ID input dot type equals hidden. Now let's check our form. Click the save icon and then swap over to the sheet and open up the edit form. We should see our ingredients right away if everything's working properly. And we do. There's one more thing I noticed when we're looking at our form. It's hard to tell what each input is for when the form is pre-filled with data. Placeholder text worked great for our entry form because everything was empty, but it's not working well for our edit form. Let's go and add labels for our inputs. Close your form and go back into your edit form HTML file. Above each input, let's add an opening div, and then place the closing div below the inputs. Now let's add a label just above our input. We are going to repeat this process for each input in the general information section and the nutritional information section. This footage is sped up, so if you need more time, please pause your video here. Let's save our work and then open our form to see how things are looking. And that is much better. All right, so now our ingredients are showing up on our edit form. The next thing we'll be working on is actually saving changes over top of the existing rows in the tables for our recipes and our ingredients. If you found my content helpful, please like and subscribe. It really helps my channel. And I hope to see you in the next one. Thank you for watching. Bye now.